You served at the embassy in Beijing from 1981 to 1984 as DCM in charge to affairs. Can you describe your role at the embassy and some of the embassy's key priorities during that time?
Well, this was an entirely new relationship. We hadn't had a relationship of any kind for 30 years, although we had begun a process of rapprochement in 1971-72. 1979 to 1981, I was the country director for China at the State Department. Dick Holbrooke, who was then the assistant secretary, asked me what our objectives for the new relationship should be. And I wrote a paper which argued that we should try to have the same relationship we would have had if we'd not had 30 years of estrangement, and that we should accomplish that within 5 years. And that was approved as a policy guidance document. And then I had the pleasure of implementing it, first in Washington and then as charge and later DCM in Beijing. I participated or oversaw the negotiation of 36 treaties and agreements. And when I got to Beijing, I discovered, of course, that the former U.S. Liaison Office, which had formerly been transformed into an embassy, still had many of the unformed characteristics of the past relationship. So I sat down. I'm probably unusual in the sense that I had considerable management experience as a result of 2 tours managing programs in the U.S. Information Agency, and I was also an administrative officer in the Department of State. So I sat down and designed a future embassy, meaning what sort of functions would this embassy have to have if you looked at a 20-year period? How would you develop career ladders for people to fill those positions? What jobs should be language qualified and what didn't need to be, and so forth and so on. And I submitted this plan and it was approved, and it became the basis for the development of what is now the robust relationship that the U.S. Embassy in Beijing supports.
Oh, wow. So you're basically starting from scratch.
It was interesting. I mean, I would say in a way, it was probably the most creative diplomatic moment of the last half of the last century.
So during your time in Beijing, what are some of the other key events and memories that stand out the most?
Well, I think the thing I was proudest of was putting the Marine Guards back in uniform. In the liaison office period, for a variety of reasons, which are kind of interesting, but I won't go into them, the Marine Guards had to give up their uniforms and wear mufti, ordinary clothes. Now, this is bad for discipline. It's bad for morale. And we had just normalized relations with China, and I thought it was time to normalize the role of the Marine Guards. So I did this on my own. I told the Chinese I was going to do it. At the same time, I told Washington I was going to do it. I knew the Chinese were going to raise hell, which they did. They actually went to the Secretary of State to complain. But I also knew that there was nobody in Washington who was likely to have the guts to tell the Marines to take off their uniforms. So I got away with it, and it worked.